That works pretty good. I can't see what's on the display, so instead now I have to talk to a fuzzy black blob. Hi. Happy Sunday. Where to begin? Okay, if there are two words, if there are three words which I could expunge from the current IT vocabulary, it would be 1, cyberspace, and 2, social media. I think they're really, really risky, harmful, damaging, a lever for bad people to do bad things. Allow me to explain. First up, cyberspace. The problem is that, laying aside all of the William Gibson stuff, the word is space. It's three-dimensional. The problem is that we tend to think of cyberspace as a real space, as in somewhere like the physical world, where you can police what goes on, and it doesn't work like that. They're treating it like what's referred to as a domain, like the sea, where the Navy is, or land, where the Army is, or in the skies, where you have an Air Force. They see cyberspace as being yet another frontier. The problem with that is it's not really a space. It's actually just communication. The same thing goes for social media. Media is a two-dimensional word. Newspapers, print, things like that. With the discussions of social media come words like media regulation. There are concepts of responsibility which are born out of centuries of newsprint. The problem is actually that cyberspace doesn't exist. The net is not three-dimensional. And social media does not exist. It is not a two-dimensional thing to be regulated. Instead, the net is very much one-dimensional. It's from me to someone with whom I am talking. It is conversations. And each of us is at the hub of many conversations with many other entities. We are all nodes in a network. The practical upshot of all of this? There's no practical difference between a Twitter account of some major newspaper versus the Twitter account of an individual human being. These are both simply sources of communication to which anyone else can subscribe. It's an entirely level playing field. It doesn't matter if you're a massive newspaper conglomerate on one end of the scale or just a single teenager on the other. So when governments talk about regulation or filtration of cyberspace, of cyber defenses and so forth, they're actually talking about interfering with communications. When regulators talk about regulating social media and what can be said, they are actually talking about regulating communications. We already have a word to describe regulation of what someone can say to someone else. It's called censorship. But one of the things that I think is really deleterious to the future of the net in general is for us to talk about regulation of social media or cyberspace filtration and protection without actually talking about it in terms of censorship imposed by third parties. I think that should be generally understood. Because if it's not, then we are risking sleepwalking into the setting up of an infrastructure which protects us from outside attack, but actually is set up to reduce our ability to interact with the rest of the world. Lack of foresight is what can doom us. There's no stopping words like cyberspace. It seems to have been grasped by governments to talk about this sort of thing. Similarly, there's no point in not using a phrase like social media because it's what's going to be used. Trying to change terminology rarely helps. But understanding that the terminology is fundamentally flawed and explaining that when someone is talking about regulation of the media on the internet. What they're talking is about regulating Twitter, regulating Facebook, regulating newspapers perhaps, but how do the newspapers communicate with their audiences? Through the same social media infrastructure as everyone else. So you can't get away from the terms, but you do need to know that they're broken and that they imply something which could be really scary.